their office and everything, we converted all that into rooms. There's 60 rooms, 2 stories, 3 nurses stations, 2 labs. They're talking about getting an MRI machine, along with the CAT scan and the X-ray room. We will all that. There's a full commercial kitchen. This is pretty standard.
Okay, that's fine. Let's Well, that's over.
David would like to say something to the bunch of things.
Okay. Yeah, so that brings us, I think, about 3,500 for the day. How are you?
How are you?
Good. How'd the tournament go?
Right.
Good.
I'd like to say a few words
Okay.
back from the city.
Okay, we'll bring the mic to you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just to
thanks.
thank everybody.
Sure.
Good.
Good. Good.
We don't know how much money we raised yet. It's all built in.
Yeah, I know that.
So we had 32 teams.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I'll put you on the agenda. I'm going to go do it right now. Thanks. He's right in there. Just go through the door and to your right. Right. I'm gonna, yeah.
Is anyone who wants to step down? Who do you want to come up?
They're together.
It's great to hear so much energy in our group today. Lee Montgomery, will you please lead us in our invocation?
Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the rain that we're about to receive. May it nourish the ground, provide us with plants and food for the future. We thank you for this club, for Rotary, for the service above self. We thank you for the opportunity to serve youth, which is our motto this month. We ask your blessings over our fundraiser project for the spaghetti dinner, so that we may serve our community in ways that we do not know yet and may not ever understand, though we know it will touch many lives. Thank you for the food that's been provided today and for those who prepared it. For all these blessings, we thank you each in our own way. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, sing and see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed, at the twilight first we whose stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we lost were so gallantly slain, and the rockets that flare, the bombs bursting in air, came through the night, and our flag was still there. Oh, sing us what songs
Thank you. Please be seated. And you know, I stand up here and we sound awesome every single time. Great job. Courtney, would you please introduce our guests today?
Second time that children's podcast came today is Miss Tina Yamas. I just told my face and never guessed that. She's here today.
Sure, yeah, David. David Lake wanted to speak real quick.
Yes, we just want to thank everybody for coming out and supporting the foundation's doctrine and maximum. Thank you for everything. We've had several of you there giving us assistance, which we appreciate very, very much. Had a very successful tournament with 132 players. We don't know how much money we raised yet because we don't have all the bills yet. But we can report on that. We did recognize 5 graduating seniors, and for some reason they keep choosing alien. We had 2 awarded scholarships to go in. One today for the first time.
All right.
Anyway, thank you again for all your support. We had some of you who played, some who were hosts, sponsors, but anyway, thank you very much.
And David, thank you for being such a wonderful member of our organization as well. He's a past president from a long time ago, I think. All right. So I'm going to call Johnny up to do our member spotlight, and I think our member spotlight's in the back of the room.
Yes,
So
he's walking in as we speak, so
we'll
we'll
just do it in the back.
do that. Everybody turn around. We'll do it from back here. We'll grab Mr. Rob Jones. Let's give him a hand clap. We're going to change it up a little bit. Get you to hang on to that. We're going to do a little multitasking. And while he's finishing up his transaction, I heard something the other day, or actually this morning, that I wanted to share with you guys. And it's something that I had kind of known, but didn't really pay much attention to. Has anybody recently heard what is the most powerful nation in the world? Anybody want to take a stab? You can't mess this up. United States? All right, I'll give it to you. The most powerful nation in the world is imagination. I don't know who said that, but I'm going to give Walt Disney credit. So just food for thought. So today we get to visit with Mr. Rob Jones. He came to me a few weeks back, and I'm thankful he did, because we always want to reach out and get to know our members a little bit more. We've grown a little bit since in the last year or so, and as we are adding new members, we want to also introduce those new members, but we also want to get those new members get to know some of our better members. And so today, Mr. Rob, if you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and your family. And
how much time do you have?
take your time. 1 o'clock?
I grew up in a small town, Marlin, South Waco, and they were down there, they wanted mom cows, 19 dairy cows. That bakery was a bakery. Then I got into the library business there on campus. It was a college market bakery for about 3 years. And then, American General, I actually come over here in the Northeast Texas Master Affiliation. I was one of the company in 26. Didn't know anybody here. So I got active in the community, Boy Scouts, I did Scouts. They had time, I put on the East Texas Area Foundation Board for 20 plus years. And just started doing what needs to be done. Be successful in elections. So 90% of people don't make it. And whenever they would ask you to speak in front of these crowds, I tell them, you know, how to do it. I say, well, it's going to be very short speech. Every one to that, I can bring one to the back and all the deal. So, it's easier said than done, but I learned those good habits, and here I am 50 years later. I have over 200 widows and millions of their dollars that I create for them that I look at, and it's amazing. I'm not being certified financial planner. So it's been a great career. The Lord's been good to me, lots of friends. I appreciate all that friendship.
So talking about the insurance, let's skip around a little bit. About your occupation, what's been the most interesting thing you've learned or that you've seen in the insurance world?
Well, they always hate to say yes, but when I walk in one of those checks, the family says, thank you. I'm glad you said yes, or you should have said yes.
So pretty much everybody's a prospect?
If they're not, then know somebody who is.
Awesome. What do we do for fun and recreation? Any hobbies that you do? We obviously heard the presentation a few weeks back, but tell us a little bit about what you do to de-stress or refill your cup, so to speak. What gets you having some fun and stress relief?
Well, I guess my main hobby is I collect arrowheads, Indian arrowheads. I have over 2,000 of them. And I just recently completed the Texas collection, which is one of all the 240 you can find in Texas, and they're arranged in 7 of my 24 by 18 display cases that have glass over the door. You take around to the other side if you want. And then my dedicator, he's nationally known. He said that I don't know if anybody's ever done that before. So I'm quite proud of myself for having put together the Texas collection. And if you all want to see that, I'd love to show it off. So just let me know, and you can come over and we'll have a cup of coffee or whatever time of day it is to go over it and look at the Texas area collection.
That sounds like a whole other presentation in and of itself. What's your most favorite piece?
Well, there's several of them that are really wonderful. Scotch gloves and Clovis. Clovis is probably the oldest one, back around 10 to 12,000 BC, finding here in East Texas. And there's probably 2 dozen or so that are really my favorites. First stage one, the most.
How did that get started?
As a boy. I didn't get serious about it until about 20 years ago. And, they're a lot easier for that one-legged man to buy than to go out looking for. I like about 25% of the Texas collection. I did not have in my 2020 collection. So I made a list of those that I needed, and I sent that out to my friends in collecting into some dealers. It took about 6 months to gather up maybe 25%. So that's kind of fun to do with that. And now my wife's all over me because they've been covering the dining room table for about a year now. She said we're going to do something different, but I don't have room to put them here. So I'm selling off some just to make room to have the collection another way to get off the table and get out for arm's way, so to speak.
Well, if it's anything like the sports memorabilia market right now, you can get some money. So let's talk about motivation, Mr. Rob. What gets you motivated? What gets what flips your switch to community, to whatever it is that you do?
Well, this sounds very self-centered, recognition. Letting, to accomplish something that somebody admires, and somebody says, hey, I'm impressed. Recognition, being able to be the top producers of the companies I represent. That's one thing that will reach recognition. That's, that's going to be good or bad. Good in a positive way, very good, but good selfish way is bad.
I heard a speech a while back where the guy started out with, I want to thank me. I don't know if anyone ever heard that, but I thought it was pretty funny. But you're right, in the spirit in which you do it, it does have a huge difference. Let's talk about why Rotary. You've been a Rotary member for how long now?
39 years.
So how did that journey get started, and why have you continued it so long?
John Hart, are you here?
Yeah, he's here.
Okay, John Hart is one of my best friends, and he's been a client of mine since 1975. And he came in first with Rotary, he was a couple years ahead of me, and he invited me to come here. And that's the way you build clubs. You invite the people that you know and want to be associated with. And there's several of you in this room who I got. There you go. And so that's what we need to do to grow our club, and to get to know new people and hear their experiences. Invite somebody to come with you. It doesn't cost anything for a guest to have a good lunch. I mean, how good a marketing tool is that? Free. So, but I saw the good that Rotary can do, and gosh, I think the polio effort started back in the late 80s. We did an awfully good job in eradicating that terrible disease from the world. There's some places that they don't allow us to go into, and that's why it's not 100% done yet. But maybe we can work that out sometime in the near future. For these companies to say, we're not letting you do that, to say yes. So, I mean,
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Gary. To you, Ms. Diane, do we have time for
Bring it up.
sports?
We'll come back to sports in a moment. While he's bringing the microphones to me, if I can have Beth, Lee, and Dalton come on up front, I would appreciate it. Beth, Lee, and Dalton come on up. As Courtney mentioned, we do have Ashley Wolfen here today. This is her third posting, so after this week, we'll be voting on her as a member. So hopefully next week we'll be installing her as a member. And second posting, Cheryl Wolf is not here. Let's see, who's first in line? We will let Beth speak about the spaghetti saga, because guess what? How many days left until the spaghetti saga? 10 days. Come on, more enthusiasm.
So yesterday, I did a little organizing and tried to put some teams together. We've had some stuff still kind of falling into place, but I feel like we're in a pretty good place now on the assignments that I sent out yesterday. If you did not get an email from me, the email didn't have an attachment, but if you didn't get an email from me, raise your hand, call me, text me something. I sent you an email. Okay. So we're going to have shifts. Obviously, if you can stay longer than the shift time that I gave you, and you want to stay, I think it's going to be a really, really fun day for us as Rotarians and as a club. So stay as long as you want to, but definitely plan to be here for your shift. And if you get an email and you say, oh, I can't do that, please let me know right away so I can get your spot filled and get you reassigned. Donations are coming in, sponsorships are coming in. We haven't heard from any of the companies that Steve Warlander submitted grant requests to, but that's not unusual. Sometimes they only meet monthly or maybe even quarterly. So definitely, we just want to be in prayer over this event. Lee, I appreciated your words before. I think this is going to be a great event for our club and a great way for us to continue to serve the community. So I really appreciate all your support. And I already warned my husband I'm probably going to be a little on edge the next 10 days until this is done. So anyway.
Well, don't go anywhere yet, Beth. Come back. Lee Montgomery. You have something for Beth today.
I have something. I have some jewelry. Jewelry for Beth. With bling. It's my pleasure, Ms. Beth Blaisdell, President-elect, to present you with your Paul Harris +4. For those that may be visiting, Paul Harris was the founder of Rotary in 1905. We honor him in this small way by major contribution from individuals like Beth. When they reach $1,000, they get their first Paul Harris pin. But then as they make subsequent donations of $1,000 increments, we add sapphires to that. And I think one more, and then you switch over to rubies. So you have 4 very nice, bright sapphires. May I? Right up there next to it.
Thank you.
Oh, here.
Hey, Dalton,
Okay.
can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
I forgot to mention, I do have the foundation square with me today, so if any of you want to make your personal contribution by credit card, I can take that today.
Thank you, Beth, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Monday, May 24th, we are going to be having our blood drive, and I'm going to pass around the sign-up sheet. There's also an online link that we've sent out. If you haven't seen it, get with me. If you can't make it Monday, May 24th, I already know 3 people that can't make it that are making plans to give at the donation center. You can do that, and we're getting the code right now so that we can give them a code, and it will count towards our blood drive, even if you can't donate on the bus. So be on the lookout for that. Randy's actually going to talk to us about the benefits of donating blood, because he sees it from a different perspective than we do. We donate and we hear the numbers, but Randy's actually seen people who need blood. So I'm going to let him talk about it while I start passing this sheet around.
I told Dalton I have a 30-minute speech about blood. He said I got 2 minutes, so I'm gonna go real fast. You know, most of y'all know I'm a registered nurse, and I'm kind of winding that career down. But anyway, I've been first-hand with blood given many times. But the thing that I remember, and part of my speech here, and I'm gonna make it real quick, is to let you guys know how awesome you are for all the blood that you give. What a great thing it is. And there was a point in my life I gave blood all the time, and somebody gave me an article one time that says you give so many times a year, it reduces your chance of heart disease. So I was a young man, my brother had heart trouble, so I'm going to give blood. It's kind of selfish, you know. Well, I become a registered nurse in midlife, and before that, I was a first responder, and I became a paramedic and a firefighter. And in doing that, I always looked for the opportunity to go that extra mile to do something, not for recognition, but I certainly didn't want to be like Chicago Fire, where we can run back into a burning building, because that's stupid. But I wanted to be the best I could and do something above and beyond. And all the years I did that, I spent more time sweeping up plastic from a fender bender or flagging some cars or putting out on grass fire. I've never had an opportunity to say, man, that was awesome. In my heart, not to go, for other people to brag on me, but one time I was in the emergency room and they brought a gentleman in and he was losing blood. And he had been losing blood for a while, and they tried to stop that blood. And when they do that, they'll put 2 big bore IVs in you, one in each arm, and they'll flip them wide open, and you've got normal saline going as fast as it can go in your body. When you get there, if that's been happening a little bit, your blood's pink. Well, your heart doesn't like pink blood, but it doesn't like nothing in there. And if there's no volume, the heart's going to stop. He was close to that. I mean, really close. And we went to work on him kind of like a NASCAR pit crew, folks, and I turned around and hadn't been a minute or two, and the blood's hanging there. Well, they hang that blood on this guy, and I know that this gentleman is not going to be here tomorrow. In my mind, I know that this is the last day of his life. They hung that blood, and the next morning, we came back in, and we called, and, I thought they needed to call Merce Walker and Tippett instead of calling back seriously. I mean, it was that bad. And I felt like, that they're not going to get anything. And he was already out of ICU. He had some other injuries. And he was in step-down trauma. He maybe had 2 minutes, 3 minutes without that blood. And if somebody says, hey, what happened there? The doctors, the nurses, the team, everybody did a great job. But, if you're a carpenter and you don't have any materials, that blood, if somebody had given saved his life. Well, I thought about that a minute. I said, you know what? 2 days ago, I gave blood. The blood doesn't last very long. Was that my blood? And I kind of felt special for a minute, because, hey, that blood, say that guy's not dead, probably wasn't my blood, because there's thousands of units given, and but I want to let you know how close it is and how important it is, and you guys are all amazing and superheroes anyway for all the stuff you do in Rotary, but on the 24th, just like Alvin said, you got a chance to do something special, and if you ever have a loved one, a family member, I didn't know that guy, he wasn't my family, he wasn't my son, but I cared about him. And I was so happy to see him at that time. And nobody really, to me, that's when I said, look at the difference given blood donation. I've tried to be fairly consistent for many years since then. I'll shut up, but thank you for all your donations, because when you're in the hospital, you see that, it touches your heart to see somebody, that person's here today on this earth because of that blood. Anyway, thank y'all.
Thank you, Randy. We had a good turnout this weekend at CAP Community Homes. We had a couple of our members really good about getting on the floor and talking and painting. Thank you, Randy and Chris and Dalton for doing that. Beth for helping clean up, and my husband came out as well. So we're going to go ahead and start our program. And I want to thank David Jones for giving me the contact information, because this is I hear it's a wonderful program. So Jeffrey Weary is our guest speaker today. He is the director of the TASK program, Child Abuse in East Texas, and the TASK program. He completed his PhD at the University of Southern Mississippi, and he has a diploma in clinical psychology awarded by the American Board of Professional Psychology. He currently is a professor of psychiatry and behavioral health at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Tyler. UT Health Science Center received a $1.6 million grant to create a child abuse program. The purpose of the program, the East Texas Trauma and Abuse Services for Kids, TASK, is to work with universities and nonprofits to train multiple disciplines in evidence-based practice for working with abused children and their families. Jeff was named an integrated scholar at Texas Tech University, and he received the Outstanding Professional Award in 2013 from the American Professional Society of Abuse of Children. He and his wife have 43 years of proud parents of a daughter and 2 marvelous granddaughters, and he is a bow hunter, a bladesmith, and a bluegrass band. Jeff, wonderful.
Thank you very much. So I only have a few minutes, but if you want to really talk for a while, come up and we'll talk about bow hunting and bladesmithing later. So, did you recommend me? So it's your fault if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Okay, just want to set the record straight. So it's my pleasure to be here. And my charge, as I kind of understand it, is to give you a little bit of information about child abuse, which is kind of a downer, right? I mean, it's not a feel-good topic, and yet it's an important topic that has been ignored for a long time. So let's just jump right into it. We're going to talk a little bit about the incidence and prevalence of child sexual abuse very specifically, and look at the impact that has on kids, okay? And we'll take a look at something called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. This is a study, I tell students, it will revolutionize your professional world. I may be in a nursing home by the time those changes occur, but it is going to change the way that people look at traumatic experiences and invest in the treatment of child abuse. We'll also look at a transactional model for kind of understanding all the different ramifications, all the different symptomatic expressions that kids have. There's not just one reaction that kids have. And I'm going to talk a little bit about evidence-based practice. A lot of what gets done in the name of behavioral health is not rooted in science. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. If I were to ask you some questions about different treatments, you'd say, yeah, that's a great treatment, and I'd say, no, there's no science. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about child advocacy centers. You probably are aware of the Smith County Child Advocacy Center run by Terry Smith. It is an absolutely wonderful organization, and we work closely with them. And we'll talk a little bit about the TASK program and take your questions. So, depending on the study methodology, the prevalence rates, which is different than incidence, the prevalence of child sexual abuse is 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men. By age 18, will be sexually abused in some form or fashion. Okay? 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men. Now, there are some studies that go as low as 1 in 10, okay? But for decades, 1 in 4, 1 in 6 has been the mainstay. Now, that's different from the number of official reports every year. That number is about 22 per 1,000 children, okay? So there are lots of incentives for kids not to disclose, right? Sometimes those incentives are absolutely atrocious. Things like a perpetrator who says, I'll shoot your mom and your sister and your dog if you tell. Okay? So there are threats made. Sometimes perpetrators get kids involved in things like drinking beer or smoking cigarettes or something like that and say, I'm going to tell your mom if you rat on me. So there are all kinds of things that perpetrators do. So the official reports that you hear about every year are not near as high as these prevalence rates, 1 in 4, 1 in 6. Now, historically, people have kind of taken a very simplistic, the geeky scientific version of this is a very linear view at symptoms, meaning A causes B. Okay? It's not that simple in child abuse because not all child abuse is the same. Not all of the context and circumstances are the same. So there's not just one reaction. Historically, for decades, people focused on things that will kind of make some sense to you. Things like the frequency of abuse, the duration of abuse, the severity of the abuse, and the relationship to the perpetrator. That has some sort of drive-by appeal, right? I mean, it makes sense that if it happens more, if it happens longer, if it's severe and it's someone that they know, it's going to have a more negative effect. That is often true, but sometimes it can happen one time by someone not well known and it not be severe and it change the entire course of that person's life. So it's not only the terrible bad abuse that you hear about, any abuse can have a negative impact, okay? Now, if we know these things, then we can predict 16 to 20% of the outcome, meaning it explains impact in that way. But that you flip that on its head, that means 80 to 84% is explained by other things. So what are those other things? Okay? And by the way, if you or a family member is in the behavioral health world, okay, there's nothing that a therapist can do about those 4 things. You with me? You look at those 4, you can't change them. That's all history. That's water under the bridge. There's nothing to work with there. So knowing that in a very real way doesn't help the child. It helps in terms of the prosecution of abuse, but the prosecution of abuse doesn't necessarily help children. Okay? So this is a really kind of geeky model that tries to explain what happens in terms of child abuse. Let's see if this works. So those things that I described before are right here. then there are things that happen at the point of disclosure. So, as a father, working this kind of work when my daughter was growing up, I knew myself well enough, okay, that if my daughter had been abused, I would have gone to a very base, primitive place, okay? And I'm a bow hunter, and I got knives, and I got guns, and that's the place I would have gone to. So my plan was to call my friend Vern and say, Vern, tell me all the reasons that I shouldn't go and kill this person. I'm just being brutally honest with you. Because I mean, I did this work every day. You know, that was my fear, okay? But that kind of anger that would have been evident by my behavior would not have helped my daughter if that had happened to her. You with me? She would have thought, my daddy's mad at me. And so there are things that happen at the point of disclosure that we can improve on so that the outcome is better. And it's just very natural for parents to have these questions. Why didn't you tell me sooner? 91% of parents think that. 60% say that to their kids. And that doesn't help them. It makes sense that that question's in their head, but we need to help them. We need to support them so that they can support their child. So those are disclosure rates. Then things happen downstream. Things like being placed in a foster home. So imagine, so you've got a purse right there. If I took your purse and I ran out of the building, okay, and you called the police, and they came and they took your name and they said, well, come with us, we're going to go downtown, and then they put you in jail and they locked the cell. So I'm a trained professional, I can help you. How would that make you feel?
Not happy.
Yeah, I would be absolutely livid. I would be rattling the cell, I'd be screaming and hollering, okay? Because I didn't do anything wrong. That thief, where is he? He's the guy. Go arrest him, put him in jail. And see, sometimes when we have to keep a child safe, we take them out of their home. We take them away from their comforter, their posters, their stuffed animals, their pets, their bicycle, their classroom, their teacher, and we put them in foster care. And we need that. But it's very confusing to a child because it feels like I don't want to be punished. Okay? So that's one of those related events. A medical exam, if it's not done well, it's not done with some empathy and taking some time, can be tough on kids. So those are related events. So those things create this abuse stress. And then we have this very important ingredient of parent support. And the field of child abuse has done a great job in supporting parents so that they can support kids. But the other things here, so in the blue are pre-existing coping strategies, and the way I make sense of the world is under that cognitive appraisals. There are variables that influence the expression of symptoms, so like age. Younger kids oftentimes have more sexualized behavior. And so boys often tend to be more aggressive and act out, where girls tend to be more internalizing. So these are just trends in the research. And all of those things work together in very complicated ways to influence the expression of symptoms. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about child advocacy centers. So if you go back 30 years ago, a child might make a disclosure and then have to talk to 12 different people. Okay, so most disclosures are accidental. Okay, most disclosures are not purposeful. Children don't wake up and say, today's the day I'm going to tell. They say something comes up, they tell the peer at school tells their parent, who tells the teacher, and the teacher talks to the child, And then after that, the principal would talk, this is in the old days, the principal might talk to the child. The school nurse might talk to the child. Then a police detective, or excuse me, not a police detective, officer in full uniform with a gun talks to the child. Maybe a detective after that, a prosecutor, someone in the ER, a nurse, a physician, okay? And I tell that story over and over and over again. And at some point as a child, I go, these adults don't believe me. They keep asking me, I keep telling them, and they don't believe me. Okay? So, child advocacy centers do an excellent job of that initial interview that meets the needs of the police, CPS, and the prosecuting attorney. And all of those players are very important, but they have different questions. So CPS is concerned about did the parents know? Did they take steps to keep the child safe? If not, the parents may lose custody, at least temporarily. Law enforcement is interested in clues that will help solve the crime. What is the color of the room where you were abused? What kind of wallpaper? What smells? What sounds? They're interested in an investigation. Prosecutors are interested, this sounds a little tacky, they're interested in prepositions, okay, on or in. Because whether the perpetrator put it on or in them makes all the difference in the charges, and if the charges aren't correct, the person walks, okay? So, all of those people, all of those players have a different agenda, and this skill is not taught routinely to CPS workers, or back in the day, wasn't taught routinely to CPS workers or law enforcement. These days, forensic interviewers, who are the folks that do these interviews at child advocacy centers, they have the toughest job in the building because they hear these stories every day. And then they go to court and get attacked by a defense attorney who calls into question their training, their motives, all of those kinds of things. So imagine that you're a child. Well, first imagine that I'm going to ask you to stand up and tell me the most embarrassing moment in your life. Okay? Well, that's essentially what kids are doing when they are asked to talk about that abuse. Okay? So just imagine for a moment that most embarrassing moment and having to tell a complete stranger about that. Okay? And so for a lot of kids, it happened over and over, and it sort of felt like the Inquisition. The child is facing people that out there, they may tell a teacher, they may tell the school nurse, principal, police, CPS, same nurse, and a prosecutor, and a defense attorney. Okay? Now, with child advocacy centers, and there are over 930 nationwide, about 76 or 80 in Texas. Now the child talks to one person, tells that story, okay, and the family gets support and then also therapy at no cost if that's what they want to do. Now, interestingly, one of the things that interests me as a trainer, as a clinician, as a research person, is we know that only 30 to 40% of families take us up on that offer of free therapy. And so, historically, the mental health profession, we've turned around and said, we scratched our chins and go, oh, they are very resistant. So we blame them for our inadequacy. So I'm very interested in how we can engage parents and families and do a better job of convincing them that this is important, that we have something that will help, and we're not going to judge you as parents. Okay? So that to me is one of the things that all child advocacy centers can do a better job of. Okay? Now, why is our program necessary? So one of the things that we do is we train people in different disciplines. So who are the disciplines that take care of child abuse? You tell me. So pediatricians do exams. Are pediatricians educated in how to do these exams? Yes or no?
Should be.
No, they're not routine. Not systematically. It is not guaranteed as a part of their training. Okay? They may get a little bit of exposure depending on where they've learned and who they're with and what their specialty is. It's not a licensure requirement, therefore people are not taught it. Okay? Now, you can become a child abuse pediatrician. It takes an extra 3 years in addition to the pediatric training, and at most we turn out 19 per year across the entire nation. 2 this year. Okay, so very few and hard to come by. We've been trying to recruit someone. It's like finding a unicorn and then convincing the unicorn to move the tile. So it's a tough recruit. But any of the professions, even social work. In social work, it's a lot of policy, but not a how-to. How do you work with these kids? I'm a psychologist. I did 129 graduate hours. I worked in a setting for my internship where all the kids had been abused or neglected, and never once in that year of internship. Now this was back in '82, so it's the Bronze Age, I understand. But we didn't talk about their abuse. And that was the very reason that they were removed from their homes. So I never even had a lecture on child abuse. And it's not changed dramatically. Okay? Counselors, nurses, now the one exception for nurses, kind of like pediatricians, most nurses don't get any exposure to this. Those same nurses get special training, but not everybody wants to be a second nurse. Okay? So our goal is to try to train those folks, to expose them to this content, to hook them, to interest them, and at least give them a basic understanding, and for those that are interested, to give them a really good training experience. So right before leaving to come here, I spent an hour and 15 minutes working with a Texas A&M Commerce student who's seeing kids in Kaufman County. Okay? And so we did some supervision around different cases. And so I like to think that I helped out a little bit, but she'll have to be the judge of that, I guess. So psychiatry, I mean, all the disciplines that you can imagine do not systematically get exposure to this. So our mission is to work with the child advocacy centers and the existing universities and the different disciplines, different departments, and to try to educate those that are interested in that work. So I'm going to stop and field questions. Yes?
Do you work with CASA at all?
So the question for the remote audience is, do I work with CASA? I haven't worked with CASA yet, though we would welcome that involvement. CASA has kind of their own training curriculum, and they just in the last 10 years have not deviated from that much. So I've been asked to teach their curriculum, but I don't do that. That's kind of like, singing your song or something, But CASA's very important. They work with kids that have been removed from the parents' care, and they serve as a resource. One of the really cool things about CASA's is sometimes when there's a court hearing, sadly, they're the only one that's read the whole record. And no one else, the social worker, the judge, the lawyers, they're winging it. But the CASA worker is often the one person in that courtroom that knows that child and the record backwards and forwards. Do you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
You had some percentages at the very beginning of your presentation.
Yes, sir.
What percent of abuse comes from the parents?
So the question is, what percent of abuse comes from the parent? It depends on the study. Let me answer a different question, because again, it's all over the map. It depends on the study, it depends on the methodology, it depends on who you're seeing. Most perpetrators are known to the child. It's someone that they know, someone that they trust. And so one of the things that I think is important to talk about is that it's that relationship that gets violated, okay? And that trust, and sometimes it is that impaired trust that sticks with people for a long time. So most perpetrators are known to the child beforehand. Yes, sir.
Maybe a dumb question, but I'll ask it anyway. Does this include teenage date rape or teenage date rape?
So, the statistics would include that, probably if it well, depends on the methodology, depends on how the study was done and how precise they got in the question. So, from a legal point of view, there's going to be a definition that may vary from state to state in terms of the age, the difference in age, and all of that. But it certainly can include that. I know I haven't given you a good, it's actually an excellent question, but it's hard to know. Oh, yes, sir.
I work in emergency room. What type of abuse? Because we run across my challenges several times, and I'm talking to someone like, oh no, we can't send it, some of them were so obvious it was awful. I mean, awful. And, seeing 20 different doctors, taking 30 pills, when you're in there with the child behind the leg in the bedroom, holding like 18 or 14 years old, they're on the side, they're scared, that's abuse.
So, Randy is asking about Munchausen. So Munchausen is basically, and I don't know that I'm going to give the accepted definition, but it is when usually it's a parent who will say that my child is sick and seek medical care even after people have said there's nothing wrong with them. Okay, so it certainly can be, and especially at its extremes, a form of abuse. And in a medical setting, that's where you tend to see that kind of abuse. In my work, I did some work in Galveston Medical Branch, so we had some of those cases there, but it's been a long time just by virtue of the settings where I work. So some of that dictates it. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you happen to have an instance or maybe a success story that you can share?
Sure. So I'll share a success story with a youngster. This is kind of a weird one, but this guy would be either the worst abuse or tied, like in second place for the worst abuse I've seen in 30 years. His father was absolutely horrific, physically abused him, sexually abused him brutally, had him sexually abuse women with him. It was just an absolutely horrible situation. And this kiddo was really down at relationships, didn't trust relationships. He had an extraordinarily supportive mom. The dad lived out of country and lived in a country where he could not be sent back to the United States. And this kid worked with me in therapy, and he did the work, not me. But what was interesting about him is every child has their own kind of language. And so, you typically think about therapy as kind of this talking therapy. This guy loved the diagram. And so I had to kind of go with the flow. And he'll be an engineer someday because he was making all these, they look like formulas, but it was his way of understanding what happened, okay? And so we went with the flow. The other part of that story, and I don't necessarily take joy in this kind of thing, but for him it was justice. The father contacted him, and basically they did a sting operation with the police because he thought he was coming to have sex with his son, who was now 17. And the police arrested him here justice is not as important to the child sometimes as it is to the parent. This guy was old enough that that abstract concept of justice meant something to him, and so that helped him. So. Other questions? You have time?
One quick question.
One question.
So you were saying that a lot of families don't accept that there even have that bad foundation that only weak people in it. If maybe you think if they change the way they use their, you're not even using that word at all, that more families would be more accepting to that.
Well, I think that it's a complicated issue, and certainly it is all in the presentation. It's all in the cell, okay? But actually, you know, so about 60% of kids that are sexually abused develop what's called PTSD, the same stuff that veterans develop, okay? And when that's true, it's actually a very respectable formulation. It's not, you're not saying you're crazy, which is the word that kids use even now. We used it when I was a teenager, and it's still being used, which is kind of interesting. Now they also use cray, it's not kind of but crazy still communicates. It's not. It's a word that has some negative connotations. But PTSD actually is saying you're having actually a normal response to an abnormal situation because your brain is hardwired to react to pain and threat and fear. It's the fight or flight response. So we're dealing with over-learning that. We've got to help you unlearn that because it's not very natural. So I need to sit down. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thank you very much. Want to get up and read the last four numbers.
5800.
5800. Wow, that's all right. I think you were here. Didn't you win this the other day? And a couple of quick announcements here.
It pays to buy lots of tickets.
It pays to buy lots of tickets. A couple of quick announcements as we wrap up for the day. Don't forget to see that. She has the square if you'd like to make a donation. We took in over $4,000 in donations today, so thank you all. Let's see if we can bring in at least 8 or 18,000 next week. That would be great. Beth says more, so thank you for all of your help with that. Just a few notes. Don't forget that we're accepting nominations for the year-end awards until May 26th. If you have anybody that you think would be a good candidate for a year-end award, the year is educator, public officer, or public servant. EMS. Yeah, that's EMS. Community volunteer or public or healthcare worker. Get those nominations in. We'll be getting those out at our year-end installation banquet and award ceremony on June 28th. We'll be sending out an email. We will need to get a head count for that. I was going to share with you guys, tomorrow night, CAC is hosting their Mardi Gras in May event. It's at ETX Brewing. There's no cost to attend, no cover charge. There's great food specials and drink and a band that plays in the Zydeco music, so just come on out. Any other announcements from the floor before we wrap up?
Free lunch.
Free lunch, all right. Jim Eccles.
Yes.
Just because you caught my attention with clap, would you mind giving us the 4-way test?
The 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First,
is it true?
Second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
third,
Will it build a real better friendship?
fourth,
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you.